I have a lot of family members. I come from a religious community that doesn't believe in the public school system and tends to have a ton of kids. I have an older sister, Julia, a stepbrother, Ron, a stepsister, Molly, a half-brother, Joe, and a half-sister, Lucy. Growing up, all of us were homeschooled. This involved a lot of neglect, lack of textbooks or seasonally appropriate clothes / shoes, unheated house, and sometimes physical abuse. I lived mostly with my mom, but spent weekends with my step-family. Both houses were dysfunctional. My stepmom used to have a severe problem with alcoholism, although she's been better in the last few years. Ron is my best friend and I would be lost without him. We've supported each other through years of hard times. And we discuss a lot how our lives could have been different if we'd been sent to school or generally had a more healthy home life. Obviously, we don't want the same thing for our younger siblings. And don't want to see them struggling in minimum wage jobs while trying to study for a GED the way we're doing. When I went to visit him recently, I found that my stepmom had gone out of the country for an entire week and left the youngest two at the house. Ron and Molly both work. Molly hasn't been doing any homeschooling for about 2 years, and are out of the house for most of the day and night. I tried to help Lucy with her math homework, but she was extremely behind grade level and kept getting distracted because she had to make lunch or do chores. Joe spends all day in his room playing video games and gets no guidance from anyone. I tried to as gently as possible get him to do some reading, but he doesn't understand how serious the situation is, and obviously is having too much fun to care. So I called CPS and reported educational neglect. And obviously everyone knew it was me. And Ron told me that stepmom said I wasn't welcome at the house anymore and to never contact any of them again. Molly is extremely mad at me. She blocked me on Facebook and doesn't have a cell phone where I can reach her. Julia, who somehow heard about all this despite living across the country, also blocked me on Facebook and reported my Facebook as impersonating a celebrity. Facebook deleted it, generally making everything harder. This stings even more because I'm already estranged from my bio mom over my religious beliefs. I now have no family members left, besides Ron, thank bejeebus, who want anything to do with me. I feel like I make enemies everywhere I go. Ron has been saying for years that he can't call CPS, and I guess this is why, but at least he doesn't blame me. He suggested that I try to talk to stepmom once some time has passed, but I would have no idea where to begin. I am currently divorced from my ex Thomas of 30 years. We ended up seeing a lawyer to help with dividing stuff. Everything was pretty much wrapped up till he said he no longer wanted any part of our kids' lives. I didn't argue with him about it since I already know what it's like having a parent who doesn't want you around, or wants to be in your life. I asked what he wanted me to tell the kids and he just said, "Whatever you think is best, I don't care. I don't want to parent anymore." Everything was in agreement and signed with no fuss. A few weeks later I get a call from my ex-mill asking if we could meet each other. When I came over she broke down crying and begging to let my ex see his kids again. I was confused about what she meant because not once did he contact me after meeting the lawyer. She went on about how my ex said he really missed them and that I was just a petty B***tch for taking full custody. Also that he was crying for days about it. I told her my version of events and she called it BS, saying her son wouldn't lie like that, especially not about his kids. Then I decided to call him in front of her. He didn't know she and I were meeting that day. I said, "Hey, has a soccer game in a few days," which he did, and I was wondering if you wanted to go? I know he'd really love it and be happy to see you. He instantly said no. I already said I'm not doing this anymore. I asked, "Well, how do you think this is going to affect Denise, his mom?" She is over the moon about them. He just said she loves me more than the kids, so I doubt this will be an issue for her. After a bit more talking we finally hung up. Ex-Mill was straight-faced and nodded at everything that just happened. She asked me to leave and said we would be in touch. Later that day I got a call from my ex saying how it's my fault he was kicked out of his mom's house, and possibly will be taken off her will. Also that none of his family members will talk to him because of what ex-Mill heard. He threw a lot of insults at me before I hung up, and now him and his mates keep calling and texting me. My friend is saying I shouldn't have said anything in the first place and I ruined his life. Yes, I plan to let Denise see the kids because I know she just wants to give them the world along with the rest of his family. I live with my parents and my brother. It's always been a dream of my parents to adopt me and bro, our bio kids. And they had come to the decision that they want to adopt an older kid. They got matched with Jess, who is 13. Due to the current situation, she is not living with us, but we've met before and she spent a weekend with us in January. Jess, despite sometimes being sweet and kind, is very high maintenance and has a lot of anxiety and anger problems. She can go from 0 to 1,000 really quick. During her stay, she got triggered by something when we were in public. She and I went to a clothes shop and my parents were in a cafe nearby. Some guy accidentally grabbed her by her shoulder as he thought she was his daughter, and he apologized immediately and started screaming. I was the only person there, and I tried to calm her down, but she ran off. She was found, shaken, but safe, an hour later. I then got grounded as I had failed in being responsible for my sister. I said I didn't have a sister. My parents were angry about this and said that how dare I be rude about her, don't I know how much she's been through? She's had other outbursts, but none so huge in public. She can be cold and untrusting and was very clingy to my parents. I do admire her and think she's very brave, but I don't want to live with her. My parents call Jess often. I often say hi and try to be civil and supportive. But it seems like the only thing my parents can talk about is Jess and how brave she is, and she isn't even here yet. We live in a 3-bedroom house, and my parents promised to move to a bigger one later this year. Recently, my parents broke the news to me that Jess will move into my room, and I can pick whether I want to share a room with bro or Jess. I don't want to share with either. My brother is messy, loud, and is your average 9-year-old boy, and Jess has night terrors and screams the house down. And it's enough having to open my house to her, but I value my privacy a lot and don't want her in my room, which is like my special place. I was crushed. I asked if we were still moving, and my parents were like, we like this place and have no solid plan. I freaked out and was like, you guys are forgetting you have another daughter and are too excited about the shiny new one to remember that the one you have has feelings and boundaries, and if you're changing everything I've ever known, at least I deserve to be listened to. If this is how life's going to be, I don't want to have a sister. Good to note, my room is big enough to have a wall put in, and my parents considered it a few years back. I would be happy with that. They refuse, even though we can easily afford it, because it is too much effort. My parents are offended that I'm not being welcoming towards my sister. And I'm offended that the life I knew is going to be turned upside down, and I'm not going to have the thing I value most, my privacy. It's a complex situation, but I'll do my best to explain. I have a bio son, Leo, 16, from my previous relationship. I married his stepmom, who is a mother of 2 boys, Connor, 20, deceased, and Derek, 12. I've never had the pleasure to meet Connor, who tragically passed away from a motorcycle accident. Derek was so devastated by this loss, and although it's been years, he's still pretty much grieving. I've seen tons of pictures and videos of Connor and made efforts to get to know who he was as a way to share Derek's grief and be there for him, to lend an ear and a comforting shoulder. It's safe to say that Derek and I grew a strong bond in no time. But my son Leo isn't close to Derek. Understandable, because not all siblings and step-siblings are the same. Leo and Derek are different in everything, which isn't a bad thing, but Leo calls himself the brutally honest type and makes insensitive comments about Derek most of the time. They tend to be under the guise of advice. Derek never complained, so I had to step in and tell Leo to stop being insensitive towards his stepbrother, especially with everything regarding Connor and his memory. Leo would say, okay, I get it, and I won't do it again. Days ago, Leo wanted to hang out with friends and asked Derek if he wanted to join. Derek agreed and put on Connor's hoodie before going out. Leo commented on the hoodie and called it ugly and asked him to put on something else, but Derek insisted on wearing it or not go. Leo dropped it. Hours later, Derek came home crying with his hoodie in hand. He said Leo and friends cut it into pieces while he was in the bathroom after they convinced him to take it off. I was furious. I asked Leo and he said it was his friend's idea, then said he had to do it since Derek wears it everywhere, and it looked old and embarrassing. I reminded him who this hoodie belonged to and he said, so what, maybe this will help him move on in life. I told him his birthday was cancelled and his friends aren't welcome anymore. He pitched a fit saying his birthday was a right not a privilege and I can't cancel it. He had my ex criticize my decision and wanted to host his birthday party, but I refused because he's grounded, so no party anywhere. She and her family called me awful and ridiculous and asked me to think how Leo will hate me for this, but I insisted he needed punishment for putting his stepbrother through this.